Meeting is in order. Welcome to the January 24th, 2023 Board of Adjustment meeting. My name is Phyllis Eldridge, and I'm the chair of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Due to the large number of agenda items at the previous January 17th meeting, the board voted to split the agenda, and the new business items E through I were postponed for consideration until tonight. So, new business, continued from January 17th. The request of Ashley and Robert T. Blackington, owners, for property located at 65 Mendham Avenue, whereas relief is needed to construct an addition to the existing primary structure, which requires 1, variance from section 10.531 to allow a 7-foot setback where 10 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 148, Lot 11, and lies within the General Residence A District. Is there anyone to speak to this? Before we start, I just want to remind everybody that the applicant has 15 minutes to make a presentation, and if anyone thinks it will be longer than that, please tell us before you start, and the board will vote about giving extra time. And anybody who comes up to speak to, for, or against has 5 minutes each. Go ahead. Tell us your name and address.
I will not be 15 minutes. I am Ashley Blackington, one of the owners. We thank you very much for considering our application. We are requesting to build an addition to move a bathroom and create a mudroom. One side of it is 7 feet off our property line where 10 feet is required. Currently, our back door out to our backyard is right along our property line, so granting the variance would allow us to also move the back door to be conforming with setbacks for that as well. That's all I got.
You may, if you would like, speak to our criteria. Are you familiar with that?
I have, yeah, that was in the letter.
You may, but you need not. It's up to you.
I think I'm good. If anyone has any questions.
Good. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, please.
I actually think that the applicant does need to speak to the 5 criteria.
Okay.
That I do need to?
I think so, yes.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you. So not contrary to public interest, the addition of the bathroom at the rear, our neighbors can't see it. It has nothing to do with the front of our house or the presentation of it. The spirit of the ordinance, it will actually bring our back door into conformity with the current setback requirements. I submitted a picture of what we are aiming for it to look like so that it will be, substantial justice will be done for it to match the character and design of our home, and values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. We are fortunate to live in a neighborhood where all work is good, and a lot of home improvement has gone on. And then literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in hardship. That has to do more with our rear door being along our lot line currently, and that the reason we are requesting the variance to build this addition is because we have 4 children, and we are trying to make it a safer and easier access for them to their backyard. That's it.
Are there questions? Yes.
So just want to clarify, so your current back door, which I think is what accounts for you being just 1 yard off of the left side, that's being moved to the back?
Yes, so I don't know if the picture is
It does.
Yeah. So the back door currently is between the fence and the side of our house, and the back door will move to the right side of the addition. So it'll be basically in the middle of our house.
Okay, so actually then you don't have that nonconformity anymore.
Exactly.
For that part. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Raham.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I'm a little confused by what you just told us. Are you planning to tear down that current entrance and exit that's along the side towards
The
that
bump
driveway?
out? No, we're just going to move the door. The
Right.
bump out is part of the original structure of the home, so we're not going to demolish
Oh,
or anything.
Right. So our zoning Board of Adjustment rules and regulations do require that when you're making additions and changing around interior layout as part of a application that you provide a new floor plan. I don't see that here, but I'm trying to understand what's happening with that bump out that goes towards the driveway.
I did submit a floor plan that was drawn out with the application. I have one here if you,
Well, so there was one that was provided. Is
Yeah.
that, so there's no interior changes whatsoever? That door, I guess I'm trying to understand, if you're not having that door anymore, what's happening with that space that leads to the door? It looks like a hallway of some sort.
yeah, the door, where the door currently is, will become a pantry. We're going to take the door out and put a window in. So we'll still have the sunlight coming in, but we won't have access to the yard that way anymore.
Okay. And in the proposed addition, what is going to be there? Is it just going to be an open porch area? I guess I'm trying to understand.
No,
what that
it will
is.
be a bathroom and a laundry space.
Right. So again, that's not illustrated, but okay, I understand a little bit better. So there is no improvement in the side setback with that addition. You're just simply reusing that space that's currently sort of in this odd, and why anyone would build what they built there, I have no idea. It's had
Yeah,
to be
it's-
very awkward
Yeah.
and kind of useless. So I understand your rationale for wanting to sort of reutilize that space, but that will still remain, it's just going to be reutilized.
Yeah, the original door is on the opposite side that entered the home, and when we bought the house, it's been deadbolted. We don't even have the keys. The owners that we purchased the home from didn't have the keys, so it's not an accessible door, which is why we had originally put one on the back, and so neither of them work or conform, and so we're trying to move that.
Okay, so at one point in time, there was only one door on that existing bump out. You put in a second one.
To access the backyard, because when we purchased the home, there was no door to access the backyard.
Okay, understood. Nothing further, Madam Chair. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Rossi?
Yeah, I do have a question about the placement of the bump-out addition. So if I understand, and I'm not sure I do, but if I understand the diagram correctly, it's the cross-hatched area that
Yes.
is the new addition?
Yep.
And the reason you need the variance is because it's within, it infringes on the 10-foot setback. Why is it placed there instead of, like on your graph paper diagram, a couple of squares over to the right instead of where it is now? Then you wouldn't be 7 feet from the lot line, you'd be potentially 10 feet or more.
It's not, because on the right side of the house is our bulkhead. So in order to have the bulkhead and stairs going down from the back door and have space for the laundry and bathroom, that's why we ended up at that 7 feet versus the 10 feet.
How does the bulkhead prevent the placement there? Could you,
The bulkhead is like right here, so they keep
oh, I see, okay.
in the aerial view, I think.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Everybody set? Okay, thank you.
All right.
Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against this proposal? Is there anyone who would like to speak to this proposal? Against this proposal? Okay, then the public meeting is closed, and we will go to the board. Discussion, motion? Mr. Mano.
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance request as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Rossi. And your motion?
As Mendham Avenue, like most avenues in Portsmouth and the houses, I'd suspect that many of them are non-conforming. As far as the proposal, given the questions by the board, because I was a little confused too, that the fact that the bulkhead is right there and they're getting around it, this proposed addition is less non-conforming than if they currently use the back pocket door. So let's go through the criteria. 10.233.21, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. I see no public interest involved whatsoever. The public would not even know about it. It's directly behind it. The house. .22, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. I believe that it would. It's a greater setback than what is currently there. It's still non-conforming by 3 feet, but that's a small request. .23, granting the variance would do substantial justice. In my opinion, it would. It's a simple addition to get better access to their backyard. .24, granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. That is true. They're putting on what looks like to be a very useful addition to their house, and if anything, that would increase the property values. .25, literal enforcement of these provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessarily hardship. The property has special the property has special conditions that distinguish it from the other properties in the area, and B, owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one, or owing to these special conditions, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and the variance is therefore necessary and able to reasonably use it. Now, anybody can make the argument they could do it over here, do it over here, do it over here, but since, we won't allow it in the front of the house, they've already said that the back door, that's out of the variance, they plan to keep it there because it's part of the original structure, and they have a porch on the other house. This seems like the only logical place, and to enforce the variance on this would be a hardship, in my opinion. That's the reason for my motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Rossi?
With regard to the unnecessary hardship test, I think the existence of the bulkhead where it is makes it not possible to locate the addition within the setback specified by the zoning ordinance, and that is a hardship of the property that militates toward allowing the variance. And I think with regard to observing the spirit of the ordinance, the purpose of the setbacks is to avoid crowding neighboring properties with excessive massing. And since this is actually set back farther than the existing wall of the main structure, I don't see that as an issue, and it does observe the spirit of the ordinance as intended.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, then the motion is to approve. The motion was made by Mr. Mannel and seconded by Mr. Rossi. Mr. Mannel?
Yes?
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Raham?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. So your petition is approved. Okay. Second item of business is the request of Lucky 13 Properties LLC owner for property located at 147 Congress Street. Whereas relief is needed to expand the existing structure, which requires 1, variance from section 10.5A41.10D to allow 2% open space where 5% is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 126, Lot 4, and lies within the Character District 5, CD5, Downtown Overlay and Historic District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, Attorney Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of Lucky Properties LLC, which is the applicant and owner of the property, as well as its member, Michael Labrie, who's seated behind me. Did we move closer, I think, to the podium than last
You're
year?
welcome in our
Or is it
space.
just
It's
me
fine.
because I don't have my glasses on right now? I'm confident everybody on the board is familiar with this property, given the prominence of its location in downtown Portsmouth. It is one of the most highly traveled intersections in Portsmouth, being at the corner of Maplewood Avenue and Congress Street. Many of you are probably also familiar with Mr. Labrie, some of the other projects he's done, including Jimmy's Jazz Club, which is next door to this property. The property at 147 Congress Street is a relatively narrow, small corner lot, has approximately 37 feet of frontage on Congress Street and 94 feet of frontage on Maplewood Avenue. Presently, there is a two-story commercial building on the property. The first floor was previously occupied by the Portsmouth Health Food Store until October of 2021. That space is now vacant. The bottom floor of the building, which is also finished, presently serves as storage and office space for Jimmy's Jazz Club. Second floor of the building, when looking at it from the ground level, is office space, has a yoga studio that occupies some of the office space. The building was constructed in the 1950s, has a very industrial look to it. There's a few other buildings that still retain that appearance in Portsmouth, and including on this block. It was constructed during that urban renewal period, maybe not the most forward-looking era of American architecture, but nonetheless, this building does retain that character at the moment. The plan here is to repurpose the existing building, add on to the left side. That'll significantly improve its functionality and also its appearance, bring it a little more in line with the character of several other buildings that have been approved upon in Portsmouth. The proposed renovations, as you've seen from the renderings that were submitted with the package, would bring to life and activate the Maplewood Avenue side of the building, which ultimately, all these improvements will result in a more code-compliant structure, more attractive, more functional for the city of Portsmouth. As it stands now, that Maplewood Avenue side of the building basically consists, as you probably all know, of a relatively monolithic white brick wall. There are window openings, but there is no actual pedestrian access to that side of the building, either access at the very front or in the back. The alternative, repurposing the building, adding on to it, would likely be just simply demolish it, build a bigger structure. There's some long-term financial advantages to that, but that's not the applicant's desire. He would like to just simply improve upon, add a relatively modest addition to the building. To bring the proposed redesign of the building to fruition, we would need to utilize the strip of landscape land, which is relatively narrow, that runs alongside the building, as shown on the plans. That area right now consists of basically some tall grasses, a little bit of shrubbery, flowering plants. There's not a whole lot there. The utility meters are also located towards the back of the property within that space. Given how straightforward the request before you is tonight, I'm not going to wear you down with facts, data, all that. All that's in my narrative. I'll simply turn to the variance criteria unless there are any questions for me at this stage. Turning to the variance criteria, granting the variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, will be consistent with the public interest. The redesign of the building is intended not just to be consistent with the public interest, but also to be a public benefit, really, that brings new life to this particular intersection in Portsmouth. To determine whether granting the variance would be consistent with the spirit of the ordinance, I think you have to look at the goals behind CD5 and downtown overlay district zoning. Figure 10.5A 41.10D, that's a mouthful. The ordinance states that the CD5 district consists of a high-density center with a mix of building types and residential, retail, and other commercial uses. There are no front yards or side yards, and limited landscaping and public parking facilities. Streets have sidewalks and trees or other pedestrian amenities that define small to medium blocks. Then moving on in the ordinance, section 10.641.20 states that the purpose of the downtown overlay district is to promote the economic vitality of the downtown by ensuring continuity of pedestrian-oriented business uses along streets. By allowing a variance from the open space requirement, the proposed redesign of the building will make the property more conforming with respect to the secondary front yard setback requirement, and certainly more consistent with the goals and purposes of CD5 and downtown overlay zoning. In the present case, requiring the property to meet the 5% open space threshold wouldn't really serve any legitimate purpose. A majority of the properties that surround it are built out to the property lines. I always hesitate to use the clicker, but if you look at see, this is why I hesitate to use it. If you are to look at the photographs, all right, there we go.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
controlling.
you're
that.
controlling
Yes,
it.
sorry.
Okay. I can't control this?
No, you can use the pointer.
It's a placebo.
All these
Which photo
nights.
do you want?
All these.
I don't have to use it that often, but
Obviously.
thank you, Stephanie. If you do look at the photos, I mean, I think the photos really tell the picture of what this block looks like in general. There is really, outside of the public right-of-way, there's really not any landscaping that we would consider, I guess, at least what the public would consider to be open space. I think when the public thinks of open space, at least me, before I really looked into the definition, I said, open space is kind of like green space. It's like landscaped areas, it's somebody's backyard, it's something of that nature. That's not what open space really is in the ordinance. Open space, for a lot of downtown properties, is just sidewalks. If you look at the definition, it really speaks to that. It's really anything that's vertically open to the sky that could be conducive to being landscaped. This particular block, there's really nothing landscaped per se, other than that very narrow strip of grass alongside the building, which really doesn't serve any purpose. So I think that the open space definition is nebulous at best. The city has, over the years, interpreted the definition to preclude areas that are less than 5 feet in width, regardless of the fact that they're open to the sky. So that's a problem for this property in general, without that strip of grassy landscaped area. Sidewalks that are open to the sky are actually counted towards the open space requirement, but areas that are partially canopied and landscaped are not. So there is a bit of a contradiction within the ordinance itself. Here, the areas that could otherwise be counted towards the open space requirement are canopied. That was a design element that was dictated by a significant degree by the HDC. So that would, if not canopied, bring us much closer to that 5% requirement. But presently, with the design that the HDC is willing to approve, we can't get there. So the property, as I pointed out, is situated at the end of a city block. There's really no separation between buildings here and very little landscaping, if any. So for these reasons, granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the area. To the contrary, I would submit to the board that it'll actually make it more consistent with the character of the area, and obviously will be now complying with the goals of the ordinance for the secondary front yard setback requirement. Granting the variance will not alter or negatively impact the public health, safety, or welfare. The proposed renovation will result in several life safety improvements to the building that would not have otherwise been mandated, including a new sprinkler system on all 3 floors, fire-rated stairwells, and hallways. In addition, Mr. Labrie intends to grant easements on the Worth Lot side of the building and on the Maplewood Avenue Congress Street side of the building for the areas that are within the property boundaries where the sidewalk runs. So that is one additional thing that will be improved upon. There will also, the 100-foot concrete sidewalk along Maple Avenue will be improved with red brick at Mr. Labrie's expense. So overall, the aesthetic and functional improvements to the property will provide a public benefit and be consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Substantial justice will be done in granting the variance. I think ultimately the question before the board here is whether the public is benefited more by the proposed improvements or the preservation of a very narrow landscape strip of land it really doesn't serve much of a purpose that would be eliminated by the improvements. In this case, I hope the answer would be clear on that. There is really no tangible gain to the public by denying the variance. To the contrary, denying the variance would result in a detriment to the public and a loss to the applicant with the functionality associated with the existing building. Surrounding property values will not be diminished by granting the variance. The landscaping will be removed, replaced by the addition. The addition is a very attractive design, should only provide a benefit to surrounding property values, certainly not any type of loss. And I think the HDC's willingness to approve the design is evidence of that. Denying the variance would constitute an unnecessary hardship. Property does have several obvious special conditions that distinguish it from surrounding properties, being a relatively small rectangular corner lot with a long, narrow building on it that's located at really probably the busiest, most highly traveled intersection downtown Portsmouth. The building does not have much frontage on Congress Street, while it has a significant amount of frontage on Maplewood Avenue that's underutilized. Due to how the building was originally constructed, the Maplewood Avenue side of the building does consist of that long brick wall with no pedestrian access that really limits the potential uses of the building. So granting the open space variance will bring the property into greater conformance with CD5 zoning, particularly the minimum secondary front yard setback requirement and the goals of the downtown overlay district to encourage these pedestrian-oriented business uses along the street. It'll also bring the property into more conforming character and appearance with other buildings on that particular block, which really define the character of the area. For these reasons, owing to the special conditions of the property, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions and their application of the property. Finally, the proposed use is a permitted one. Therefore, it's been deemed reasonable by the powers that will. So for those reasons, I hope you'll approve the variance before you. And I know Paul has a question for me, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Derek. What is going to happen with the second entrance to the basement?
I'll let Mike answer that question for you because he, I know, has intimate knowledge of what will happen with that. So better him answer it than me fumble through the answer to that question. Yep.
Hello, Michael Labrie. So that particular entryway, so you're knowing about that entryway, does that mean that you used to go downstairs to Club Spin when it was there?
It was the Ranger Club at that point in time.
Ranger Club, yeah. So we're eliminating that, and we've added another entrance on the Congress Street side toward the bottom right. So you're going to be able to go downstairs directly from a door in the front off of Congress Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I asked is because the basement is huge. Literally, I would suspect there's a fire code that you would need two.
Right, so
exits.
there's a hallway that travels through the basement, and so
Yeah.
you have the rear and the front.
Okay. Okay. That was my only question. Thank you.
So I have a series of questions. Can I ask them all?
Go right ahead.
So I would need Attorney Durbin for this, actually. So, hi, Derek.
Hi.
So I have several questions.
Sure.
Is a cafe going into this space?
That was a question for Mike. I mean,
It is a Thai restaurant, yes.
Okay. All right. So back to Derek. So you're saying one of your rationales is that it's to encourage retail, restaurant, and light business use.
Yeah.
And that, but you're putting a restaurant in there. So you said here that the narrow building makes that difficult.
no, I think, I think the point I was trying to make is the activation of that side of the building makes it very realistic. I think the front of the building itself with only 37 feet of frontage definitely limits the window marketing or visibility allowing that Maplewood Avenue side of the building to really, well, there's a good picture of it. It sort of draws people in, is conducive to a use like that.
May I
Yep.
speak to that, please?
Sure.
The restaurant is one of 3 tenants who will reside on the street level, and you can access all 3 of those spaces from Maplewood Ave, entering from either the front door or the side door that's down just past that white car, the front of that white car there. So there will be a contemporary art gallery in there. There will be a woman's clothing shop, and then the restaurant, which is actually fairly small in size.
And that will be the entrance on Congress Street.
There are actually 4 entrances on Congress Street.
Okay.
And the restaurant has one entrance on Congress Street. The clothing boutique has one entrance. The contemporary art gallery has one entrance. The entrance to go down into the basement is there, and then an entrance to go up to the second level is also on Congress Street.
Okay.
Each individual entrances.
So I think that undercuts the argument that the amount of frontage makes it hard to use that space.
Well, it's allowing us to get a new entry into the basement, which expands that use down there. And it's also allowing us to break what was a single tenant into 3 tenants on that floor, and making a more varied and dynamic use of that building, which is much more than just a restaurant.
Okay, thank you. And so I think back to Attorney Durbin. The open space is actually very well defined in the ordinance. It's not nebulously defined, and it says that it has to be free of all structures. And I recognize you said that the canopy, if it weren't for the canopy, would not be a structure, but it is. So I find that the city's, this is, frankly, I agree with you, not what I would think of when I think of open space, but I think the city is very definite as to how they defined open space, and it is very clear that it is supposed to be free of all structures. Just let me see. In terms of the special conditions, the storefronts on Congress, even going back to the old Rudy's, they all have really narrow storefronts.
Some of them, this particular block, the storefronts are, I think, with the exception of the lounge, but that still has a longer frontage. They are quite a bit longer, wider than what this particular building has. I recall having done, a rough calculation on them just from looking at the tax map, and you can kind of see it here. But this particular block, the buildings do have quite a bit more frontage than this particular lot. This is definitely, well, it's very narrow, but it's one of the smallest lots by land area.
Okay, and just my last question,
Sure.
Madam Chair. So I think it's great you're giving the city an easement, Mr. Labrie, for the sidewalks. That's pretty typically done, but getting the easements does not in any way rely on these variances. The easements could be given either way.
They could be given any time, sure. Yeah, they were as part of this process, though. They were because this application has gone for work sessions with HDC. It's been submitted for TAC, so that was something that was discussed with city staff and offered. It's not a reason for the variances. It's just simply one of the improvements that would be made. With respect to your comment about the open space, if you did remove the canopies, and I asked for a rough calculation, we're very close to the open space requirement. The problem with it is the canopies are integral to the design that the HDC is willing to approve. You know, I mean, you could try to massage it different ways to get to the 5%. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, ultimately, my personal opinion reviewing the open space definition, I do believe it's nebulous. I believe it's been interpreted different ways by the city, at least in the course of time I've spent either on this board or preparing applications. The interpretation that you have to have 5 feet in width in order to constitute open space is not defined anywhere in the ordinance. However, we're being conservative. That's what we apply here. If you look at the buildings that surround this, there are areas that are considered open space, but they're basically, they're like entrances, like they're sidewalks. They're considered to be open space to meet the requirements, but they look no different than this, except we have a canopy. I mean, literally, that's, if you look at the front of the building, the back of the building, you look at the pictures I submitted with the application, several of the other properties that are run alongside of ours, that's considered open space in the back on the Worth lot side. Some towns would define sidewalks as structures. The city of Portsmouth says because they're vertically open to the sky, if they're not canopied, we'll let you count that towards open space. I mean, it starts to become a little of semantics to some extent. I mean, yes, they're canopies, but you can also that doesn't preclude landscaping. And when the ordinance talks about landscaping with respect to the definition of open space, it's also talking about areas that could be sidewalks with planters on them. So I would submit to the board that it's not well defined. I mean, I understand you disagree with that, but there are a lot of contradictions in it, is what I would say, because we can put landscaping, and there will be landscaping within these areas, they just won't be considered to be open space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Taking up enough time.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes. Thank you. The proposed addition, I'm really looking at the first criteria, and I appreciate what you're saying about the intent of the downtown overlay district and improving, pedestrian access to commercial space. How exactly does the addition do that? I mean, it's no additional ingress or egress from Maplewood Avenue, right? There is. That's what so could you
Yeah,
show
I
me?
know it's hard with the rendering because it's obviously smaller. You're looking at it, and it kind of is.
Well, that's what you don't have to make excuses for
Yeah.
me. I just didn't understand it. So
No,
can you show
yeah.
me where the additional ingress and egress of the building is from Maplewood Avenue? Could you point that out for me, please?
Mike, do you want to just show them?
As I had mentioned,
He needs the microphone.
So just
He
don't
can
touch the
just
screen.
point and he can.
Okay, no, it'll
Take the microphone.
move the image. Is there a better image for me to point to?
actually, there was another rendering that I saw from the back of the building. I'm sorry. There was another rendering from the back of the building. Yes, right here, see?
Yes, you
Okay,
can.
so that's a door going into the building.
So there's stairs going up. We covered it to weather protect it. You go up, and then there's an opening, which used to be one of these windows here
See.
that we turned into a passageway. So
Okay,
you have
got it.
easy access right into the building, and you can access all of the tenants. You can actually access the entire building by entering that door.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rossi, are you finished?
Oh, yes, I'm finished.
Okay, no,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. Mr. Raham?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So again, looking at that same image you have up there on sheet 9, I'm trying to understand all that glazing that you have along the side there. Is any of that openable, or is that just permanent glazing?
Of the addition?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, we have awning windows. You can see the awning windows run above. All of these are openable.
Okay, so the upper portion is, but not necessarily the lower portion.
Originally, we had double hung windows there. The HDC didn't like that. They wanted more of a modern glass because we're trying to add a modern addition to this Soviet-style building. So really, the whole reason for the canopies is so that we can add this beautiful arc that wraps around the corner of the building, and it's allowing us to soften that corner of the building and to bring more of a modern flair. And so the HDC wanted us to carry that theme by having the glass. They likened it to a Greyhound bus going along there, but I like to have openable windows, so we put those awning windows in there.
Okay, so at the sort of the patron level, they won't have open windows, but there'll be something openable up above that level. Okay. And then, so just to reiterate, the canopies that we're referring to, again, looking at sheet 9 here, is this sort of curved area that is covering over the sort of the concrete walkway that's there. It's got the word signage up above it, which would presumably be a signage for a basement level business. And then if going to the next sheet, sheet 10, again, part of it is that sort of curved piece that goes over what is currently perceived by everyone as open public sidewalk, but that is in fact, that sidewalk area, or at least part of it, is actually part of this property.
It's all private property.
Is technically private property.
Actually, the way that planter is located there, people cannot come down the sidewalk without going on private property. That's why the easement is actually rather important.
Right, the intent is what is now perceived as sidewalk will in fact, you'll have a legally recognized easement with the city to allow that to continue to be used in that fashion going forward if somebody in the many distant years in the future decided they wanted to do something completely different.
Correct, and in order to accentuate the arc of that canopy, you see that we curved it and had it die halfway into the frontage. So actually, we didn't carry that canopy all the way down to the corner of Jimmy's, because we weren't really looking to add coverage, but rather use it as an aesthetic piece.
Right, at least for that frontmost portion, the portion that encloses the new sort of eating area, presumably for this new restaurant.
And it carries up from the far corner of the building in the rear, a single line comes up and then curves and arcs around that corner. So it's actually kind of an elegant shape that softens that building and adds a more modern look and feel to it, which I believe adds a great improvement to what that building looks like.
And lastly, thank you, Madam Chair. Where are you at right now with the HDC process?
Done.
Yeah. Okay, the approval was good. Okay. That happened, I guess, more recently than I was aware, but yeah, approved through the HDC process is.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dave, just to just point something out to the board real quick, that area where the canopy ends, where it arcs around onto the Congress Street side of the building, that's the open space area. I mean, that's basically where the 2% comes from, is that area that's not canopied. I'm not sure if I tried to make this point, but the build out on the side that we're adding on to, it is actually, again, this is not just a request, hey, we want to become non-conforming. This is actually a request to offset with greater conformity on that side in terms of the property line build out, offset by obviously a loss of open space. So,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I can indulge you for one more question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, and just to understand too, going to like sheet 12, the new trash enclosure, that is also property that belongs to this building. However, because you're putting required trash enclosures there, that can't be counted. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, one.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, could you clarify, so it seems like, so the intention is actually to activate the streetscape on the Maplewood side?
Correct.
So even if you could have another entrance on Congress Street, is your preference is still to have it on the Maplewood side for activating the streetscape?
That's exactly right. It's really to sort of create a linkage, I guess, for lack of better words, with the rest of Maplewood Avenue. I know there's a gap, obviously, with the Worth lot, but to create something that is more pedestrian friendly coming up Maplewood Avenue, accessibility, all of that, I think, is a major consideration here.
Yes.
Just two follow-up questions. With respect to the current door that's on Maplewood Avenue, and I've only been in the health food store, I don't know the rest of this building. Does that go down to the basement?
The one in the rear
The current door, the one near, there is a door,
to the Worth?
no, on the existing building.
Yeah, are you talking about it on the Worth lot side?
Yeah,
Yeah, that goes down into the.
that goes down.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So-
might have been to the former club there.
There are two doors on the back, on the Worth side. One goes down, one goes up. The other door on the Maplewood Ave side that we were discussing earlier is a bad set of concrete stairs that goes down to a metal door that used to be an emergency egress when the club was down there many years ago.
Okay, thank you. And just one more follow-up question. This HTC gave a certificate of approval without us granting the variance first? I didn't think that they could do that until we granted a variance.
Yeah, that's always been my understanding, but Mike, do you know if?
We were granted a certificate of approval. We didn't, I think that the calculation may have come late or maybe was misunderstood. I don't remember exactly how that sequence
Yeah,
came about.
whoops, sorry, that was loud. Yeah, and I don't know either because I didn't recall the certificate of approval being granted, but now thinking back in time, I do recall having seen, you get the emails from the city when you're in Viewpoint, an email to that effect. But I will tell you from my experience from working on the application is that these numbers regarding open space have been bantered back and forth between engineers, city, everything, because of the definition. And this was the most conservative approach was taken, is to ask for 2% open space. I think there's been differing opinions. And we've all had probably a different opinion on what should or shouldn't be counted, but I think this is the better approach. So I could see that may have been the reason why the HDC granted the approval. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Middle.
I've got a question. It might be for Derek, but I think it might be for Stephanie. Since we're talking about canopies, those are considered part of the structure, correct?
In what respect?
Well, if they need a variance for a canopy, I mean, we have two canopies showing in this application, and
So if I might, the variance is not for the existence of the canopy. It's for the lack of open space,
Correct.
which the canopy inhibits. And
okay, are the yellow canopies part of that building that is removing open space? Or are we just talking about the orange part on the application?
The yellow as well, Paul. Yep.
What?
The yellow areas as well are canopy did not consider to be open space. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, this is the question I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
If we're just talking about the orange part, then the canopies aren't part of either adding to or subtracting from open space.
so the only piece of this property that meets the open space criteria is this piece right here.
Purple. Yeah.
That's purple. Because if there's a canopy over it, it can't be counted.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Where is the city subtracting for the canopies that are currently on the building.
That will be gone, you mean?
No, no, no. There are 2 canopies on the building right now.
I think that might be a question for the project team. Are the canopies that are existing, I'm sorry, do you mind if I
No, go ahead.
clarify? So are you asking if the canopies that are existing currently are going to be replaced or?
Well, obviously, they're going to be replaced.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. The question is whether or not they were part of the open space calculation to begin with for the existing conditions of the property.
Yeah.
When we show the, yeah. It's a good question, Paul. I'm not sure the answer to it. To the best of my knowledge, they were not, I don't think they were considered to be canopies by the project, by the
Yeah, I understand.
the designer of
but,
the
I mean,
plan. Yep. And they were considered to be part of the open space that's
Because you have
available.
the blue canopy, which is above the, on Maplewood, which is above the entirety of the steps and the emergency access from the basement. Then you have the green canopy, which covers 2/3 of the property on the Worth lot. Now, those are already in place. If you're removing them and putting up another canopy, granted, different design,
Sure.
it's whatever, where is that calculation in there? That's my question.
Yeah, I think, again, I think that those areas were counted as open space as far as I know when I went over the plans with the engineer that worked on it. I think I think we were trying to be as conservative as possible and ask for any potential relief that we thought we would need to not run into a compliance issue. But as far as I know, I went over this many times because it's very, very confusing when you get into these design elements. And my understanding was is those areas that you're talking about in the existing building, for lack of better words, the canopy areas were considered open space as part of our existing open space calculation. So, very convoluted way of
But you were well over the open space coverage for, I mean, you're well over, it's 5%, you were at 18.5%.
Yeah, correct.
So-
Counting the areas that
Yeah.
Paul is
Yeah.
referring to, arguably they could be or may or may not be open space.
Right.
Madam Chair, may
Yes,
I make
go
a
ahead.
suggestion on that point? I would suspect that because the existing canopies are simply fabric over a light framework, that they may be viewed differently than what is being proposed with the applicant's renovation, which will be more substantial and essentially a built structure as opposed to something that is more easily taken down. Would be one thought.
I think, yeah, again, I think the approach was to be conservative with the calculations. So err on the side of caution with respect to what we have for open space, err on the side of caution with what we don't have for open space with proposed conditions. I know these design elements get very tricky. I've looked in the ordinance a lot. It's hard to always figure out exactly what is or isn't. In terms of setbacks, we actually, like I said before, regardless of those design features, are becoming more compliant. If they're considered structure, then we're really, really more compliant. But just bringing the building out itself makes it more compliant on the secondary front yard setback, which seems counterintuitive, but it's the nature of the character zoning to try to have everything sort of in a consistent streetscape.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? In that case, the public hearing is closed. Yes, go ahead, Beth.
My thoughts on this are that I don't find the ordinance confusing. I think it's clear how open space is defined, and So therefore, I do not find any confusion there. I don't see that there is hardship to this. I understand Mr. Labry's desire to make it maximum use of the lot, and there's no problems with that. That's a business decision, but I don't see that there is a hardship or a persuasive case for reducing the open space on this lot. I'm aware that it's a strip at the side and at the back is utilities. However, the loss of that open space around that corner, I do think will be a loss to the public. That definitely is not outweighed by a benefit to Mr. Labrie. So I guess I'm not going to be supporting this application, but I'm looking forward to hearing other people's comments.
Mr. Rossi?
I have a slightly different take on this, and that is that I do think that this application meets the criteria. It does fulfill the intended purpose of the, of the ordinance, and particularly with allowing pedestrian access to the building from the Maplewood Avenue side, better access for commercial purposes. But with regard to the special conditions of the property, it is an oddly shaped lot, and because of the lot, any rectangular building on the property would end up with a long wedge-shaped space along, the Maplewood Avenue side because of the angle of Maplewood Avenue. And I agree with Ms. Margison that the definition of open space is quite clear in the ordinance, but it does state that unless you have at least 5 feet of width at the, at some point in that wedge, you can't count it as open space. And so I think the special conditions of the property are the angular shape of the lot or the irregular shape of the lot, kind of bringing it out of compliance with the requirements that are quite clear for open space. I also note that although the open space requirement is not satisfied, the building coverage is not in excess of the maximum allowed. So the actual coverage of the building is slightly, ever so slightly below the 95% maximum. And that does kind of reinforce kind of the nature of the shape of the lot, pushing it out of compliance as opposed to an excessive use of the lot. So those are my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? David?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So, what are the public interests, going to that first criteria, what's the real public interest with not allowing this design? This property, as has been indicated, it is an oddly shaped lot, and I think that was driven by the fact this building predates the creation of Maplewood Avenue, and as we all know, that Maplewood Avenue was one of the after effects of the decision to do urban renewal in this area, with tearing down all kinds of buildings further down, heading towards the waterfront, and then a desire to connect up a common intersection between Middle Street and as a better way into the downtown, back when people were concerned about malls wiping out downtowns and whatnot. This was viewed as a much better way for traffic flow, and it has proven to be that way for better and for worse. But it did create kind of this odd situation here. So what would we potentially get? Well, yeah, there's a little bit of a green space along Maplewood Avenue. I mean, I don't think it really is terribly inviting in terms of somebody saying that they would want to stop there and enjoy, the odd collection of plants that are there. In addition, as has been pointed out, per our open space definition, there's no obligation on the part of the property owner to maintain that as green space. They would fully meet the relatively small 5% requirement that's put in place by the character district. They could choose if they wanted to simply brick that over. So I don't think that there's anything here about a loss of green space. I do believe that the proposed addition does really help to activate the Maplewood Avenue side, and not only having the entrance there, which is, I'm not sure how much exactly that will get used, but I really do think that having the presence of large windows, light, people, activity behind it. I think it would have been even better if we could have gotten the HTC to agree to maybe allow it to be all opened up in the summertime and even have more of a noise interchange a little bit there, although that might actually be a negative for the patrons with Maplewood Avenue traffic. But nonetheless, it could have been something that could have been making this new proposed addition even more engaging to the any individuals who are walking on Maplewood Avenue. I would have to say, from having walked past this many times, sometimes on my way to Club Spin late at night, that it really just it has no pull whatsoever for, you just want to walk past that area as quickly as you can and move on to the next thing that you want to have. So I think this is another great step in the improvement of the area towards trying to bring a more pedestrian feel back to a property that has not really had much changes whatsoever in the past 70 years. And then, so the final is I fully agree. I think our definition of open space is quite clear. That said, we know that the applicant is asking for an exception to it. So really, what's the balance? What do people really want to get out of their open space? And I think they are getting I think they're getting more and enough of the benefits from that slight loss of open space, with the fact that that now we will be definitely preserving a area of open sidewalk that is precious through legal agreements with creating an easement for it. I think the canopying of it is relatively minimal, and the feel of it is such that people are not going to go and think that this is being overbuilt. It's going to feel very natural. And I do understand that the HDC's desire to sort of get their architectural hats on and help to steer the architecture to give it this appeal. And I think that it is appealing overall. And I think in the end, the project, whatever the little loss that the public would feel from the supposed loss of 3% of open space, is more than compensated for by the other added benefits of this project, such as the bringing the street life to the Maplewood Avenue side, and providing what is, I think, an architecturally attractive and pleasing final result. So with that, I would be very supportive of granting the requested relatively minor relief that the applicant is looking for.
Would someone like to make a motion at this point? Okay, go ahead. You don't need to
Yeah,
make
I was
a
just going to
motion.
add that in addition to the aesthetics, which I like, I'm a fan of the canopies, but they are also functional in terms of protecting people from the weather, and it's a way to do that without increasing the building coverage, which is under 95%.
Okay. More discussion? A motion, perhaps? Yes, Mr. Ray.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we grant the applicant's request for variance as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metzen.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I gave sort of some of my background thoughts. I'll now just try and coalesce on some relevant facts. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. So as I indicated, I do think there is a public interest in trying to improve the streetscape along Maplewood Avenue, attempting to create more of a connection with passersby in that area. I do think that there is an architectural aesthetic that is being sought here and has been refined through a very arduous process with the Historic District Commission to try and ensure that the final result is something that will stand the test of time, be consistent with all the requirements for the Historic District. And I think that I certainly trust the Historic District Commission's judgment on that, but I would also second it as from an amateur perspective. That I think that the resulting design, while it does require compromises in the absolute letter of open space, I think provides a substantial public benefit that was, which validates that this variance would be in the public interest. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Again, this 5% open space is probably not being reflected by any of the other properties along this area of Congress Street. I mean, for a long time, all the buildings here were built out to the maximum extremes as the applicant's representative indicated, the downtown overlay district heads us in that direction and is what we're looking for. When we created the character districts, we wanted to get just a little bit more variety, so they did include this sort of very minimal open space requirement in there. Whether or not as that was being created, there was truly an appreciation of what was going to constitute open space could be debatable, but it is certainly what the letter is. That said, the spirit is that there are some spots out of the applicant's property. It's not built out completely to the property line. That there are places where the public can still access and have a sense of freedom. I think this project, from that more fundamental concept, more than meets the spirit of the ordinance. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Again, this allows the applicant to make full use of the square footage that is sort of created by this oddity of Maplewood Ave kind of cutting through after some buildings were taken down. At the same point in time, is there really any major public interest to not having that additional 3% of open space when as the applicant has indicated, they still have the sidewalk space in the back part. There's some areas that probably could have been counted toward the calculation but can't be because of the very strict interpretation and very conservative interpretation, as the applicant has indicated, that they have for trying to ensure that they are being as prescriptive as possible about what the potential impacts of their project are. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, this relatively small loss of open space in a downtown area that by and large is all built out right up to property lines probably wouldn't be perceived at all. And I just think that the overall increase and improvement of the property and the ability to make Maplewood Avenue more pedestrian friendly, I think would just only enhance the desired nightlife that is what draws most people to this area of downtown. And then comes our unnecessary hardship. Again, in this case here, I do think you have an existing building that's on an oddly shaped lot. The applicant is trying to make use of that oddly shaped lot, but with that comes some architectural hindrances that to give a sort of complete sense to what this odd shaped lot would try to engender, instead of just having it sort of cut off and looking kind of weird. The HDC has insisted upon these sort of rounded canopies sort of add into the sort of rounded nature of just the way this lot ends up happening to be, which is very unique compared to other lots, and was again likely created by the destruction of a couple of buildings to allow the city to have a benefit of connecting Maplewood Avenue to the end of Middle Street and sort of create a traffic connection through there. So I do think that constitutes a hardship. I think that the request is a very reasonable one. It is very minor. It is the only thing that the applicant is asking for. They're not asking for relief in any other way, just simply for this open space requirement. And that there's really nothing that would really be gained by the public to prevent the applicant from going and trying to create this that would outweigh the benefit that the public would get from getting it. So with all that, I would recommend approval.
Thank you. Mr. Mattson, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that regarding, in the spirit of the ordinance, that for this district and the downtown in general, it is desirable essentially to have the lots fully built out. From a pedestrian standpoint, it's more satisfying. And again, activating the streetscape on the Maplewood side here, where it's essentially a blank facade. There are some windows, but it's not very inviting as a pedestrian. And I know we're not voting on design, but I would say that this is tastefully done, which is also a benefit to the public. And initially, I was a little concerned about the sight line of vehicles turning right at Congress there, but after visiting the site, I'm not concerned, particularly because of the stop lights. And I know TAC will also be looking at this, but I don't see it being an issue. So I'm definitely, after reviewing the 5 criteria, in favor of this.
Thank you. Is there further discussion before we go for a vote? Okay, then the motion is to approve. And the motion was made by Mr. Rahum and seconded by Mr. Mattson. And we'll start with you, Mr. Mannell.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
No.
Mr. Rahum?
Yes.
Yeah, I know who you are, Mr. Rossi.
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. So you're approved.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item G on the agenda is the request of Timothy and Rebecca O'Brien, owners for property located at 396 Miller Avenue, whereas relief is needed to create a second driveway, which requires 1, variance from section 10.1114.31 to allow 2 driveways where only 1 per lot is permitted. Said property is located on Assessor Map 131, Lot 24, and lies within the General Residence A District. Is there someone to speak to this petition?
Yes,
Aye.
thank you. And I apologize, I brought my weak reading glasses, so I might struggle a little bit in transition from different strengths. Members of the board, thank you for your time today. My name is Tim O'Brien. My wife and I have lived at 396 Miller Ave for 10 years this coming March with our 4 kids. Over the 10 years, we've made significant investments to improve our home and yard and to make a place we love and cherish and is really our forever home, I guess you'd call it. An ongoing concern of ours is the road, the South and Miller intersection, and traffic. Over the years, we've seen many accidents near our driveway, including a car hitting our neighbor's house and a car jumping the curb right after our kids were playing hopscotch. We've also experienced numerous accidents with our cars parked on the street, 1 broken rear windshield, 1 car sideswiped, 3 broken mirrors, and 2 cars completely totaled. With a growing family and 2 daughters on the cusp of driving age, our concerns will continue to grow. Parking on the street will become more necessary, and exiting our driveway so close to the intersection will be even more dangerous with these inexperienced drivers. I'm speaking with you tonight requesting a variance to allow for a second driveway cut on the opposite end of our driveway, both to increase parking space, reduce the inherent car shuffle that you have with multiple cars and soon to be 3 active drivers and a 4th shortly behind that. And to eliminate on-street parking. The current arrangement, while a significant, mostly unusable width cut, only allows for single forward entry, reverse exit, and 2-car parking. Just to explain, we call the driveway cut in front of our house the landing pad. For some reason, when the city redid the street right before we bought the house, they put a 36-foot driveway cut, which included 13 feet on the side and then 26 feet or 23 feet right in front of the house. And when we moved in, the whole front of the house was paved, and so it really was a landing pad. So if I use the term landing pad, that's what I mean in the discussion. Our request in the application is reduce the current driveway cut on the left side of the property from 36 feet to 13 feet, while adding a second driveway cut of the same size, 13 feet, approximately 84 feet down the road towards the right property line. Of note, the property is unique in the neighborhood as it is a long frontage of 134 feet on Miller, with a house situated on the far left, the current driveway being on the far left property line. This 134 feet is over twice the average in the near vicinity. The request requires a variance to section 10.1114.31, which would allow 2 driveways where only 1 per lot is permitted. Before I go into the criteria, any questions? I'll just go quickly through those.
No, go ahead.
Okay, great. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest in that it will move the majority of reversing traffic from the property further away from the busy and dangerous intersection of South and Miller. In addition, allowing for additional parking and the placement of the new driveway cut will effectively reduce parked cars on this west side of Miller. Parked cars, as you can imagine, and you may have experienced, has resulted in traffic congestion and maybe more importantly, neighborhood complaints. The spirit of the ordinance will be observed as the overall driveway cut will be reduced from 36 feet to 26 feet. The large frontage and smaller cuts will improve sidewalk continuity and align with the surrounding homes. In addition, placement of the cuts on the lot with a larger frontage than the surrounding lots will fit within the fabric of the neighborhood. Substantial justice will be done as it will reduce on-street parking and associated traffic congestion, allow the property owner myself to avoid further damage to vehicles as a result of on-street parking, and provide safer ingress-egress for vehicles, especially with our children entering the driving age. In addition, a big consideration is preservation of the existing driveway in the current form eliminates the risk of deconstruction towards one of 2 170-year-old oak trees which line the existing driveway. You can see in the picture those 2 oak trees that we have there. There's a picture in the Public Works Department looking up Miller, and our house is the only house, and those trees are probably a third the size. And you can see just those two trees. There's obviously no condos behind it, but they're fairly historic in the city. The value of the surrounding properties will not be diminished in that the overall reduction of the driveway cut length both removes the landing pad that I talked about, look in front of the home, returning it to the norm of the neighborhood, and improves pedestrian flow, in particular handicap access, by reducing the frequency of parking delivery trucks, crossing guards, visitors, and myself when needed to shuffle cars on the landing pad. Overall, the look and usability should improve. That landing pad is a natural place for any deliveries that we have to the condos across the street for us, for trucks to stop. And for us, it's because we have to do the car shuffle to try and avoid how much we pull into the street backwards. It's a natural place for us to put a car while we do that shuffle. We have had notes on the car suggesting that maybe we shouldn't park there because of that blockage, which frankly we hadn't considered when we did it, and it's a good point. Literal enforcement of the variance causes a hardship in several ways, depending on the approach taken by my wife and I in the event a variance is not granted. If we choose to replace our existing driveway with the new driveway cut, the act of removing the established gravel driveway, which we installed instead of pavement to protect the trees, would put the tree at risk and presents a situation where parking and drop-offs is a significant distance from the door, so children, packages, visitors. The resulting larger driveway would result in a smaller yard, so our side yard is essentially our backyard. It's a very narrow, it's a very shallow lot where the house is pretty much 10 feet from the back property line, and so our side yard is the yard that we have. If we choose to maintain the current driveway configuration despite a large lot, and due to the orientation of the house on the lot, we lose an option to add a garage in the future, and parking and safety issues will remain. Thank you.
Questions?
I'm sorry, you speak very fast.
Sorry.
So
Yes.
I just want to understand everything. So you wouldn't be removing the existing gravel driveway?
No, so do you want me to come walk up here? I won't touch
You
the
have to
screen.
take the microphone with you, please.
And I learned not to touch the screen, so.
Don't touch.
So this is the existing driveway. If you actually go up a couple slides to the second or keep going, there's a bigger picture. Keep going. So this is the existing driveway, right? This driveway cut right here is the entire existing driveway. We would be keeping the gravel driveway and reducing it from the 36 feet 4 inches to 13 feet, and then adding a 13-foot with a gravel parking pad at the end.
Okay, so but you'll still be using the existing driveway as a driveway?
Yes, but not as a primary, just because of those safety concerns. But we will have 3 cars in the very near future, and so this adding the driveway gives us that ability to reduce how much we're backing up into the intersection, which you always kind of pray as you do, and allow us to have a car or 2 parked at the other one.
But, so to get out of the existing gravel driveway, you don't turn around? 'Cause
We don't have the space to turn around.
Okay.
So you have to, it's like this is no longer, it's just an asphalt like sidewalk, and then it's a gravel driveway. This is deceptive. You can't, there's no space to turn around here. You have to back all the way up into the intersection and go that way.
So, and my last question is, why not eliminate the gravel driveway, given the concerns that you stated as to safety, and make the new driveway bigger?
Because this is the way that first off, it would make this whole section of the yard pretty much unusable, right? It just becomes a space that is not in use. And then we have to create this bigger, which cuts into what is our yard.
And is that the little blue square there? I couldn't tell. I drove by.
That's a little, yeah, sorry, that's a little shed,
That's a shed.
and that's the house.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rossi.
Do you have any intention in the future to change that shed into a garage or move it and make it a garage where the new driveway is going?
We have talked about it, and this gives us the option to someday do that, but we don't have the plans right now. I mean, it's a natural place if you were going to build a garage, but we don't have that.
And why not make that driveway, just the newer one, just big enough so that you can turn a car around and go out front ways instead of backwards?
Because of how much of the yard we'd be sacrificing to do that. Because that's a 13-foot driveway, you'd essentially cut into the yard, like this far to be able to turn around a car.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Raham?
Yeah, so what you called the landing pad, that was there when you originally bought the property?
Yes, it
Okay.
was. When they redid that street, probably around 2011, 2012, it used to have no curbs, and they paved it completely. If you go on like Google Maps, you can go back and you can see that the whole front of the house was paved. In fact, all along, it was paved from here and then all the way back here.
Right, so you're saying your actual lot was paved as well?
Yes,
Right. So you eliminated all that pavement?
yes.
Okay. But was part of the purpose of that pavement to allow you to, A, park more cars potentially, and also be able to do some of the maneuvering that you're now discovering is a bit of a problem?
The way that it was paved, you couldn't maneuver it, but you could park 3 cars in front, yes.
Okay. And no thought about trying to return that back to some additional parking with, I guess I still don't see where a lot of your issues that you're having with your current gravel driveway are resolved in any way, shape, or manner, other than allowing you one additional parking spot so that you don't have to park on the street. But did you give any consideration to trying to sort of recreate some of that to give more maneuver room and create the additional parking that you now desire?
No, because the house, if you look at pictures from back then, the house it doesn't fit the neighborhood, and it looks horrible, frankly. The biggest thing that we gain from not parking on the street is the damage that we've had to the cars and the neighbor complaints that we've had. Although it's legal by city parking ordinance to park on the street, it's not accepted within the neighborhood or the people driving by, between the honking of horns and obscenities that come out windows.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how you end up with vehicle damage like on your substantial justice slide.
First one was a line painting truck that took out the side of my car, and the second one was a neighbor backing out of their driveway at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, looks like it lost the rear axle or something on
Yeah, it flipped it around onto the curb.
Okay, understood. Okay, that's all I have for questions. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes,
go ahead.
I forgot one. And when I drove by the house, I saw this, but that line that is from the house to your boundary, that's a fence.
That's a fence,
What is behind that?
a shed, and a little courtyard, because it's an entry to a back mudroom.
Okay, but you could remove that fence and make more of a driveway.
You could, you still wouldn't be able to turn around. There's no space it's like a 20-foot wide section. It's extremely difficult to turn a car around.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll open it to the public. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone here to speak to, for, or against this petition? Okay. The public hearing is closed. Yes, Mr.
I'd just
Russell.
like to comment that I drive past this property frequently on my way toward the intersection with South Street. It really is a hazard when there are cars parked along the curb there, because you can't get around it without crossing the double yellow line fairly close to the intersection, and it's, I would like to see something done to relieve that. I can't figure out how to relate that desire to the 5 criteria, for approving the variance. So I hope somebody will be able to fill in those blanks, because I'd really like to see something happen here.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Mattson?
I have a couple of initial thoughts to add. I guess the first is that this lot is essentially twice as wide as the neighboring lots, so 2 driveways on there would be a similar spacing of curb cuts as the other, so this lot is unusual in that sense. And then another thing is I definitely agree that the parking on the street is a safety concern. And I've seen some minor mirror accidents and stuff, and also I remember reading in the paper about the car that drove off and hit the neighbor's house on the other side of Miller Ave. But I think parking off-street would be a huge advantage, because even though if you still have to back up onto the street, if you're doing that in the daytime, you've got, I know it's supposed to be 25 miles an hour, and in general, I don't think people speed too bad, but the issue is more about the narrowness of the road. So if you're parking on the street, that's a bigger issue than backing up. So I think just having the ability to park off-street is a huge advantage. And in regard to the other board members' comments, I do think maybe there could be a way for some type of 3-point turning situation for the new driveway, but for the existing driveway, it's not about making it deeper, benefiting being able to turn the vehicle around. It's just that it's not wide enough between the house and the property line. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bayham?
Ms. Marsden had her hand up
Oh,
first.
okay. You may go.
So I'm a little torn about this application. I do think that there are safety concerns. However, the applicant still does continue to use that garage, that driveway. I think that the Miller Avenue is problematic for traffic and on-street parking. However, I think that's a condition that's shared by every single other house on Miller Avenue. When I did drive by this property, I drive by it a lot, but I did notice that perhaps it was somebody in your house had parked up on the sidewalk. On the other hand, I don't see why the applicant can't expand the driveway in the new position and just use that as a driveway. I recognize that would take away some of your yard, but it is much bigger than the lot is bigger than some of the lots on Miller Avenue. So I know it's kind of a hard one. I recognize the safety concerns, but yet I think that I think perhaps another driveway could be constructed where the new driveway would be.
Mr. Bayham?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I too am torn on this application. I really, the applicant has talked a lot about improving safety. I don't see what's being proposed is going to in any way, shape, or manner improve the safety that much. It's really a matter of the applicant wanting some additional parking, off-street parking, which I do think that there's merit to not parking on the street in this area. Does sound like the Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee could possibly do something about all this.
Exactly.
I mean, if this really is such a significant neighborhood concern, this is a aside, but it would seem like something that could be taken on in that forum and solved. So, I mean, I do understand the desire from the applicant to have additional off-street parking. I would say that that there would not be justification for just that benefit to the applicant. That said, I really think that Mr. Mattson's point of the rhythm of the neighborhood, going to the contrary to the public interest, really has a lot to do with the nature of the neighborhood. The applicant has one huge benefit here, which is from a hardship standpoint, they have an unusually large lot. If you look at right across the street, the rhythm of the driveways that you have going along there, what the applicant is asking for is certainly in conformance, if not even farther apart than what those driveways would be. So in terms of presenting something that is atypical for the neighborhood, in terms of entrances and exits onto the street, I don't think that that's a problem. So in that sense, I'm supportive, really solely for the reason of getting cars off the street and allowing the applicant some adequate parking. And I can understand why the applicant would want to, change the front of the house from being sort of a sea of asphalt, or, if you wanted to change it to even gravel. I do think that there is a positive for the neighborhood as well to have a minimum amount of gravel along the streetscape. So I do think there's some benefit there. That's all. Thank you.
Would anybody like to make a motion? Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I would like to move that we approve the application as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Please state your motion.
The variance not being contrary to the public interest is supported by the traffic considerations that we have been discussing and the safety considerations. In fact, the variance would promote the public interest with regard to traffic safety in that particular stretch of road. Substantial justice is being done because the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by harm to the public, or to say it differently, denying the application would not result in any benefit to the public. In fact, it would eliminate a potential safety benefit to the public. So substantial justice is done. The value of surrounding properties are not diminished. We have not been presented with anyone in the neighborhood who has made a claim that this would infringe upon their property values, so we have no evidence before us to help force us to conclude that this would diminish the property values in the surrounding area. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship, and the unnecessary hardship, so on and so forth. I'm not going to read the criteria, but the hardship of the property, I guess you could say that the unusual nature of the property is the size of it, and as has been pointed out, along this stretch of road, one would normally see an additional driveway in that amount of frontage, and therefore it is a reasonable use and fitting within the character of the neighborhood. And I believe that criteria 5 is therefore supported and satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mattson, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess for the hardship, I guess I would also add that in addition to it being a large lot, it's relatively wide and shallower than the others, and also where the house is located on the lot can create some hardship for driveway location.
Okay. Is there any discussion before we?
Can I
Mr.
add-
Mann,
I'm sorry, can I add something?
As,
can we hold 1 second? The motion maker would like to add some.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that with regard to hardship of the property, there is the 2 well-established oak trees. I didn't want to overlook that. Sorry to interrupt you, Paul. But I think that precludes expanding the driveway width-wise to allow better turnaround.
Thank you. Mr. Mann.
There's a lot of people on the board. I'm sort of betwixt and between on this. And trust me, I know exactly how you're feeling about being on a busy street and trying to back out of your driveway. As somebody's already pointed out, I don't know if giving you a second driveway is going to accomplish that. Granted, it's farther away from the intersection, and a couple of sections means all the difference. At least you have a straightaway. Mine's on a curve. So, and I get the idea that sometime in the near future, this corner of your lot could be the garage. I think you would have been more, I don't know what the appropriate word would be, if you, from your new driveway, propose a circular driveway around your trees and coming out and just eliminate where you are right now. This way you don't have to worry about backing into traffic, but that's not your proposal. I'm all done.
Okay.
So I think I'll add, so the purpose of the zoning ordinance, so the purpose, spirit, and intent of the zoning ordinance is that this is a single-family residence, single-family district, and all of permitted accessory uses are allowed, subordinate, driveway certainly is subordinate, one would say necessary, to the use of the single-family residence. And as a single-family residence, it seems clear they want one driveway. So I'm not going to support it. So maybe let's just do a roll call.
I used to live on Miller Avenue. Everyone backs out, but your location really is a very difficult location. And I have been influenced by Mr. Mattson's suggestion of the rhythm of the driveways with your larger lot. It just seems a shame to me that given this variance, it's still going to be just the same. You're still going to be backing out into traffic. I feel like there's a really missed opportunity here, but that's not my purview. So I will be supporting this motion. I will be supporting this motion. So if there's no further discussion, the motion is to approve the second driveway cut, and the motion was made by Mr. Rossi and seconded by Mr. Mattson. And we'll start down there. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rahun?
Yes.
Ms. Marchison?
No.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
And Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Tell your children to look carefully. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next petition is H, and it's the request of Karen Buffard Revocable Trust and Karen Buffard, trustee, owner for property located at 114 Maplewood Avenue, whereas relief is needed for the installation of an AC condenser unit, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.515.14 to allow a 2-foot setback where 10 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 124, Lot 4, and lies within the Character District 4L1 and Historic District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Good evening, Ann Whitney. I'm the architect for the project. This project is actually a rebuild of an existing structure that was there, and the existing structure was tight right to that back property line. And part of the redesign was to get it off that property line. And we felt that this was a good location for the AC unit, even though it's very close to the property line. If you look on the photo, there's an existing building, a butter building, and there's a whole gang of AC units that are on that corner. And it seemed like, even though, the basic, that this seemed like a good place. I'm showing just some fence screening. Actually, if you go to the next page. That shows those existing units. That's a section of blank wall where we're going to be locating it, and you can see what that current existing elevation is. Right now, I'm just showing an L-shaped fence screening that the HDC is going to require, but since I've submitted this, we kind of re-looked at, and we're actually going to be fencing that entire rear property and doglegging it up towards Maplewood, and doglegging it back to the building. So this will be completely concealed from the abutters. So that's what we're proposing. We felt like the side yard, it's the only yard space for this residence, and it'd be nice to keep it out of there, and there doesn't seem to be any opposition to putting it on that back elevation. So our criteria, 1 and 2, not contrary and consistent with this Spirit, this location is no public view, and the unit will be screened from the any abutter view from fencing, and the screening also helps with any kind of noise. Substantial justice will be done. This location has several unscreened AC units and heat pumps at the abutter's rear yard, and it's sort of continuing a place where these units can go that are not overly, creating any hardship for any of the butters. This variance will not diminish the property values. I think the special condition of the lot is basically our non-conforming rear and left side. The left side is running along the cemetery, and they're both pretty tight. And though that we've improved the rear lot yard, we were sort of set with how far we could go forward with this existing building. We basically were covering the existing footprint and reducing it a bit at the rear yard. So that's, if there are any questions? Oh, actually, the other note, when I submitted the application, they'd sent me that cut sheet with and I just assumed it was the largest unit, but it's actually a smaller unit. It's a 30 by 30 instead of a 3 by 3. So we'll have a little bit more of a setback, 6 inches, but basically be in the same location.
Okay, other questions?
I
Yes.
just, I'm confused. The air conditioning unit that you're proposing to put in is for the new construction?
Yes.
Okay. So the little gang of.
Oh, yeah, if you go
little
back to
AC
the
units,
first, go back to the
that's-
site plan.
Yeah, that's for the other building on this site.
Yeah, these are the existing units that are in that back corner. And so there are 3 units currently there that are unscreened. And we're proposing to just put it on that back side. So we're kind of, the mechanical systems for these 2 lots are kind of happening in that back lot line.
So it's.
That's what the neighbors have.
That's what the neighbors, those are the
Oh, okay.
neighbors.
Neighbors have that.
Okay, those are the neighbors' units,
Yeah,
the
it's over-
abutters'
right,
units.
They
Yeah.
want one, they have 3.
Oh,
They have
okay.
3. Yep.
Okay, all right.
So there's 2 ACs and a heat pump back there. Yep.
Okay.
And it's
sorry.
kind of a no man's land between the 2 buildings. There's not a lot of activity that happens between there. Yep.
Okay, sorry, I was.
Yep.
I lost the thread there somewhere. Thank you.
Mr. Van?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So, back in 2019, the fact that you were moving this and shrinking it relative to the property lines was a positive factor, I think, that the board considered at that time. Why was it not recognized at that point in time that you were going to want to put AC into this new structure and needed a location for a condenser?
They hadn't decided on the heating systems yet. I assumed actually they were going to wanting to use a heat pump, which would even have a bigger setback, but the owner had decided to go this route with a more conventional heating system with AC. So at the time of, the variances, we hadn't designed the mechanical systems.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak against this petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Then the public hearing is closed. Board, what would you like to do?
I would just comment that I really don't think the diagrams do it justice. If you walk through the cemetery and take a look at this area, it's really clear that this is where the compressor unit belongs. It becomes like a utility plaza between the 2 structures, and it's visually much more crowded together, than you think by looking at this diagram. And I think the addition of a fence is great. It'll really shield that whole, that thing from the cemetery. So I think it's good. I'm supportive of it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion from anybody? This side's been quiet tonight.
I made the first motion.
Oh, well, that was a long time ago.
I will make a motion to approve the request as presented.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Bully.
Any second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Rossi.
per the request, we get quite a few of these. My first look at the fact that, you know, the existing is 1 foot and we're making it less non-conforming. That goes a long way. And given the situation right behind you with the immediate butter, this would be an improvement. As for the 5 criteria, granting, .21, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. It would not be. Public would have no interest in seeing this, the backside of this house, or the 3 other heat pumps. .22, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Since this is a non-conforming lot, and you're proposing it to be less non-conforming, I think that is in the spirit of the ordinance. Granting the, .23, granting the variance would do substantial justice. I believe that it would. 24, granting the variance would not diminish the value of the surrounding properties. It would not. The value with this rebuild plus this, I believe the surrounding properties would only enhance their values. .25, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Property has special conditions, given where it is and the site of the building, which has already been approved. And owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the specific application. I believe that to be true. This is probably the only place you're going to be able to put it, and given the nature of what's right behind it, I think it's a great location, and that's why I made the motion and support it.
Okay,
I have nothing further.
okay, thank you. Any, no further comments? Yes, Mr. Raymond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will support the motion. I agree it's the right place to go and put the condenser. I guess I'm still somewhat disappointed that it was sort of presented before this board that, you know, there was going to be some improvement in the setbacks, and now we're already, you know, before the property is completely done, encroaching back on those. Admittedly, with a relatively minor encroachment, but that said, precaution for board members too. We always need to be careful when being presented information that that is fully reflecting what the ultimate plan is going to be. I really don't like the idea of coming back and nibbling just that little bit more and nibbling a little bit more and nibbling a little bit more. That's all. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is to approve, and the motion was made by Mr. Mannel and seconded by Mr. Rossi, and we will start with Mr. Mannel.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Margison,
Yes.
Mr. Raham,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so you are approved. And the last petition for this evening is I, the request of Thomas E., Mary Beth B., James B., and Megan C. Reese, owners for property located at 305 Beverly Hill Road, whereas relief is needed to renovate the existing primary dwelling into a 2-unit dwelling and to construct a new single-unit dwelling, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.440, use number 1.30, to allow a 2-unit dwelling in the SRB district. 2, variance from section 10.513 to allow more than one freestanding dwelling on a lot in the SRB district. Said property is located on Assessor Map 255, Lot 5, and lies within the Single Residence A, Single Residence B, and Natural Resource Protection District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Sharon Summers. I'm with Donahue, Tucker, and Chandela, and I am here tonight representing the Reese clan. And with me tonight is Jim Reese, his wife Megan, and sister Betsy Zender. The other members of the family are home. What I'd like to do, thank you, Stephanie. If you could put up that, I guess it's Exhibit 1. Yeah, that's perfect. Great, thank you. What I'd like to do tonight is just make a couple of comments, and I'm going to turn it over to Jim Reese, who I think can probably give you the best sense of what happens out there, and then I'll address the variance criteria. I would also ask for your indulgence in the sense that we have a member of the public who actually is a relative of John Hetz, who's in the audience. She intends to read a letter that she wrote into the record. I know it's late, but I would ask that we be able to submit that letter into the record after she reads it.
Okay, of course.
Okay. So with that, as I've indicated in the application materials, the Reese family obtained the Het Farm property back in 2014 with the intention of having the family live there. And additionally, while everyone in the family, other than the children, has jobs to pay the bills, a large motivator for the family in acquiring the property to begin with was a desire to actively farm the land. More recently, Betsy, Tom's and Jim's sister, has decided to join the team. This property is situated, for those of you who have been around for a while, is situated on what is known as the Het Farm. And back in 1989, Peter Laughlin worked diligently to get this property put into a conservation easement to be held by the town. And going back several decades, several dress sizes ago, I was the assistant city attorney at the time, and in fact witnessed the conservation easement deed. So this has a certain amount of personal interest to me. In being present on the property since 2014, the family has learned that farming and managing the land requires workers. And the Reese family believes that the best way to do this and to achieve that goal is to have the family be on site. The Reese family is close, but they also need their privacy and can't be living in each other's pockets as they are currently doing, all in the farmhouse. Accordingly, we are seeking relief tonight for two things. One is to, if you see on the exhibit there, we have a proposed 32 by 24 home for Betsy Zender, which is identified. That's Jim's sister. And that is the existing breezeway. All that's intended to do is to renovate that and to make that into a two-family structure, meaning the existing farmhouse and the renovated breezeway. The second request that we're going to do is to ask for a second freestanding building on the property, which is depicted there as the proposed. And these are all in preliminary designs, but the preliminary design that we have at this point is 38 by 28 home, and that would be for Jim and Megan Reese and their children. So with that, at this point, and I should also note that we do understand that we will need to get some additional land use relief. We're going to need to go to site review, have them look over issues such as the driveway and whatnot. But I'm going to turn this over to Jim at the moment to describe it in a little bit more detail. And then I'll come back and address the variance criteria. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, but other than that, I'll be back.
Hi, everyone. As she said, I'm Jim Reese. So my wife, Megan, and my sister, Betsy, are back there. Rhonda Stevens lives... You can't see it, but it's right up here. She's our immediately adjacent neighbor. She'll explain that she's grown up there her entire life, so she's got a better gauge of history than I do. When we came here, we saw the availability of this property, and both my brother and I had been looking for a farm for almost a decade throughout the area. And this came up for auction, and we were lucky enough at the time to get it. But we really want to keep this as a working farm. We really want to actually improve what's going on there. The backfield, for example, has probably been fallow for 50 years. The headwaters of Sagamore Creek are on the farm. It's prone to a lot of flooding that's seasonal. So in the backfield, they cut out a lot of drainage ditches way back when, long before our time. Those have to be cleared out in order to make that backfield arable again, in order to be able to plant crops. Presently, we have rented out the space in both of the barns for the horse business. Everybody comes by, they love to see the horses. That's a lot of work. We don't handle the horses directly, but the amount of labor that goes into the property is huge. Megan and I are not going to have 10 kids. And that's what you used to do for your labor force. So we've accommodated with siblings. The kids are growing up now. Logan's 16. He's pretty adept at driving the tractor. He would have been here tonight, but he had other plans. So on any given month, there is so much work to do off hours that it takes the people to do it. And we had not intended on living in the same house for this long. I love my brother, I love my sister, but you do need a little space. That's really all this is about. We need to be on site. Within the first week, a horse got loose. We had to chase him down Beverly Hill Road. It's part of the deal. It's what you've got to do if you're going to do this for real. It's early mornings, it's late nights, it's a lot of what is, let me see if I point this out. What we would envision for Betsy's house, this is the existing breezeway. They built the main house in 1810. They built the addition. That was Civil War era. That's 1860. The breezeway that we call it, Betsy's house is going to be about the same size. What's important about that is we don't have anywhere heated to work on tractors, equipment that breaks. There's a basement underneath that's already there. That's going to, or a garage actually, that's open to the north side. So that would be really wonderful, especially in weather like this, to be able to work on stuff inside. Right now, we're working on it upstairs in the barn, which you can't heat. So for all the winter months, it's good to have access to that. The red outline that you see is the 2-acre buildable lot that's right on top of the hill. We're trying to keep, obviously, all the buildings within that range. The barns, I believe, don't have to be on that, but we're trying to keep all the structures on the buildable lot and maintain the other 38 acres for all the farming activities. So, any questions that I can answer? I know Sharon can address all of the criteria, but.
I guess we're set for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to briefly summarize the variance criteria. And if it's all right with the board, what I would suggest that we do is that I present the variance criteria together, since they functionally are so similar, and then obviously you will probably want to debate and take a motion on them separately. So the first criteria is that the variance is not going to be contrary to the public interest, and to determine that, one looks at the whether or not the variance is going to alter the essential character of the locality, or whether it's going to threaten public health, safety, or welfare. All of this taking into account the essential goal of the underlying ordinance. As I've stated in the materials, there's no clear indication as to the prevention of either two-family houses or a separate standalone single-family house within this district. However, it's likely that what's intended to happen is to prevent overdevelopment and excess density on the particular lots. So we believe that given the conditions of this lot, by the way, I would add that we our materials are presented conservatively, referencing only the 2-acre portion of the entire lot, which is buildable. I know in the staff memo, they use the entire 37.9 acres. So I think you can take that into account. But either way, we more than satisfy the various density issues. The spirit of the ordinance is, as you know, combined with the public purpose. The third criteria is whether or not the values of the surrounding properties are diminished or not. As for the breezeway construct, the existing farmhouse has been on the property for many years. The breezeway portion is going to be replaced with the attached second dwelling. It should add little or no visual impacts to the abutting property, and I submitted some photos which shows you that from the street you won't even be able to see it. We have preliminary designs of the building, and we can state that the height of the breezeway as renovated will be consistent with the existing farmhouse, so that you weren't going to be looking at a multi-story breezeway there. The same thing is true with regard to the standalone dwelling. We have, again, a preliminary design. It's going to be of a cape style. It will be consistent with the farmhouse, and the anticipated size of that is approximately 38 by 28 feet with a similar height line, so that it's not going to stand out. As you can see also from this Exhibit 2, I guess it is, the proposed location of both the breezeway and the standalone house is quite far away from anybody who could possibly see this. So the bottom line is that there will be no negative impact to the surrounding properties for their tax valuation. With regard to the substantial justice element, this of course has been discussed in other applications tonight, is a balancing test, is a determination of whether by granting the variance that the benefit of the applicant is going to be outweighed by a detriment or loss to the individual or to the public at large. We would suggest that the benefit to the applicant here, if this is granted, is to provide adequate space and privacy for those who are currently or in the future residing on the site and who may choose to assist with the agricultural or forestry activities that are on the conservation easement portion of the property. There's no known detriment to any individuals. There's ample parking here. There's going to be no significant traffic that's going to be added by this. The freestanding house will have 3 bedrooms, and at most the breezeway will have 2, so we're not talking about an excessive amount of cars that are going to be added to the traffic out there. And again, that will be reviewed by planning board. We do not believe, so as a result, there's no particular concern about detriment to individuals in the neighborhood, and as a matter of fact, the Reeses have talked to as many of the abutters as they can find, and they haven't determined anyone who has an objection to this. And as a matter of fact, one abutter is here tonight to speak in favor of that. With regard to the unnecessary hardship case or test, in terms of the special conditions of this property, I've identified a couple of things. One is that the property itself is extraordinarily large. It's 37.9 acres. The second special condition that's associated with this property is related to the use of the property, in that the lion's share of the property has restrictions on the use, which are limited to agricultural and forestry activities, and the overarching goal of that conservation easement is to preserve open space. The third special condition, which really flows from the special condition having to do with use, is because of the conservation restriction easement restrictions, it really guides both for the fee owners, which is the Reese family, and the city, who is the easement holder, what's going to be happening or reasonably could be expected to be happening on this property. And what that is that somebody's going to be taking care of and looking after the agricultural and forestry activities on site, which is the only thing that's allowed on the lion's share of this property. As Jim has described in a little bit, you need a lot of bodies in order to do that. And in many respects, the logical way in order to try to structure that is to have those bodies living on site. There's not I mean, he could speak to this more effectively than I can, but I think that their greatest chance of getting the work done, because workers are not necessarily plentiful in this region to do this kind of work, is to have the family members do it. So collectively, we believe that these ideas are in fact special conditions. Second element of the hardship test is whether or not there's a fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the application here. As applied to the 2.1 acre portion of the property in which structures are allowed, we will still absolutely be adhering to the rule of low density. And if you take the larger lot area of 37.9, we are absolutely complying with the purpose of keeping low density. And finally, with regard to whether or not the proposed use is reasonable, we would suggest that both with regard to renovating the breezeway into a two-family dwelling and also a standalone, that this is absolutely reasonable. This is property is subject to an easement which is going to benefit or does benefit the city of Portsmouth, and also happens to contain the last working farm in Portsmouth. And what we believe is reasonable is anything that can be done to try to further the prospects of the last working farm remaining intact. And we also noted in the materials that even if a future owner does not choose to actively engage in the agriculture and maybe hires people, it is still more than reasonable to have these separate structures there, given the huge acreage on the lot and the fact that it really doesn't impact the density requirements. So I would be happy to answer any questions which the board may have. And also Jim can answer any questions, and we do have one of the Het relatives here to speak as well.
Are there questions? Mr. Rossi?
Thank you. I would just like to have a little bit more color on the history of the property with regard to the interactions with the zoning board. It must be very frustrating to come back and ask for the same variance twice.
Well,
why did the first one expire?
I think what happened was that, and again, Jim can probably address this more explicitly than I can, but they got the variance in 2015, and life being what it is with children and work commitments and various other family issues, they just didn't get to it before the variance expired. That, coupled with the fact that they now have a new player on the scene, Betsy, which necessitates an additional form of variance, means that that's why we're here the way we are. Jim, do you want to add anything to that?
That's a good summary. We first came before the board when the variance was first granted, when it was just my brother and sister-in-law, 2 kids, and Megan. And without going into detail, there were a lot of life circumstances that happened that impacted our ability to move forward with construction at the time. There's some health problems in the family and things of that nature. Megan was starting up a firm. I ended up starting up a firm. We both have businesses in Portsmouth now. So we got a extension, as you know. A few other things happened. We finally got to the point where we can actually pull the trigger on this and make it work. But it's taken a lot longer than we had anticipated from the get-go.
But you're ready to go now.
We are ready to go now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, yes, Mr. Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have no doubt that your client is trying to do something that's in the best keeping of the spirit of what was created here, and you probably have more intimate knowledge than I do. From what I've heard, there was a fair amount of drama associated with trying to transfer this into conservation, and certainly it's a very precious asset for the city now. Understanding that this board did grant relief for a second dwelling unit on the property. Now we're looking for 3 dwelling units. My concern is that a future owner, right? This runs with the land. What more nefarious purpose could someone use what this board would grant tonight, if we were to approve it, for something that would not be as in keeping with the spirit of what was trying to be accomplished? So towards that end, I was wondering if you had any thoughts if the board made a stipulation that the 3 dwelling units must be occupied by a familial relation, someone of familial relation, or someone who is a full-time employee on the farm, if that would be some kind of an acceptable stipulation to your client, just to help kind of preserve this precious asset that a lot of people worked very hard to try and make sure was available to the city going forward in whatever perpetuity is, right?
I would be somewhat reluctant to agree to that, only because, first of all, I don't think that there will be any nefarious activity taking place there, because the nature of the property in and of itself, the only thing that can happen is within that 2-acre lot, or 2-acre portion of the parcel. However, I guess I would say that in future, should the Reeses depart and 3 unrelated people choose to live in each of these separate dwellings, I don't see that there would be any impact on the purpose of the ordinance, which is to prevent an excess impact on density. And again, I think your point is well taken, that as a practical matter, I can see that employees managing the forestry and managing the agriculture might want to live there. But in terms of marketing this in the future to restrict it to that, I'm not sure that I would want to impose that restriction on my client in terms of future marketability. Those people may not want to live there. They may be some sort of a combination of the two, and I think it could pose difficulties with them.
Okay.
Ms. Mudge,
Following up on Mr. Graham's part, I think that he and I are thinking a little bit along the same track. The multifamily dwellings are 3 or 4 dwellings which are not permitted in the single residence A and single residence B zone. So if a stipulation, as Mr. Graham had suggested, was not acceptable, what about one that says that no more than 3 dwellings will be allowed on this lot?
I think, let me ask my client, I think that would probably work. That's fine. That's fine. And I think that, and I think that that would, in fact, probably go towards the root of Mr. Room's concern, which is that you don't want to develop a colony of dwellings out there. You want to have it be a reasonable number. So that's perfectly acceptable to us.
Because given the size of the lot, that is certainly, could be a possibility going forward. So, thank you.
any further questions? Thank you. I'm quite excited. I think somebody is going to come up. Is there anybody to speak in favor of this petition?
Hello, my name's Rhonda Stevens. It's Rhonda Het Stevens. And I'll correct a little bit on this. I do live at 303 Beverly Hill Road, which abuts this property. It was owned before us by my grandmother and grandfather, and my father was raised there. They obtained the property in 1940, the same year that John Het obtained the farm. And it was John's wish that relative lived in that property. And so he got a hold of my grandfather, Frank, and said, why don't you guys consider moving in there? And at that time, that property had been partially destroyed by a fire, and my family moved in. I did not live there. My father grew up there, and then later in life, my husband and I bought it from my grandmother. We've raised our kids there. We've been there since 1994. So I did submit a letter to you briefly explaining this, and I think I got it in time, so it should already be in part of the public record. I just want to add that after I wrote the letter, I called my father and told him about this planning board meeting and mentioned to him, and I said, do you have any concerns? Knowing John Het, John and Maud, and the family and what they wanted done with this property, do you have any concerns? And he said his only concern was that no building be done outside of that 2-acre section on the top of the hill, that the conservation land remains a working farm. And he said if that's their intention, that he's all for it. And he's very happy to see that a family would be able to go in and be a part of doing this, as that was John's intention also, that family was part of this property in this area. And it was passed down from John to his grandson prior to the Reeses getting the property. So I just, we talked it over. We feel that it's reasonable to have 3 units up there. Even if it were other owners, that wouldn't be a hardship for us as a neighbor. And we believe it's consistent with the family's vision of what they wanted to happen on that property. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone else to speak in opposition to the petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against? If not, the public hearing is closed. Board? What would we like to do? Ms. Marchison?
I think I'll take a stab here. I would like to approve the application as presented and advertised with a stipulation. If I get a second, I'll explain why.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mantle.
Okay, going through the 5 criteria, the first 2 are the variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance shall be observed. The public interest and spirit of the ordinance analysis is intertwined, and for purposes of this motion, I am combining the 2 variance requests presented by the applicant for the 2-family dwelling and for the more than 1 dwelling per lot. So the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance is this lot is contained, this huge lot is contained in the single residence A and single residence B district, and the restriction on no more than 1 dwelling unit per lot and no more than the 2 dwelling units per the other area, 10.440.130 in our table of uses, is to prevent excessive congestion and density, and I find with this particular application, this is a humongous lot. It is the buildable part of the lot is 2.1 acres. However, the total lot is, I believe, 39.7 acres when you take into account the conservation easement part. It is in the single residence A and single residence B district, but there are no nearby neighbors that would that the excessive density on the lot would actually threaten would actually alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So I feel like the applicant has successfully proved those 2 variance criteria. The third one is substantial justice is done, and this is a balancing test. The benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by the harm to the general public or to other individuals. In general, the public, through its zoning ordinance, would like to restrict density or on lots. I do not believe that that is the case in this application. Again, this is a farm on a huge lot that is not really in a neighborhood per se. So I do not believe that there is any benefit. I don't believe that there's any harm to the general public by granting this variance. And then the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. We did not get any real testimony on that. However, using our common sense, the addition of the second unit and the construction of a freestanding single living unit will not harm the surrounding properties, especially given how far away they are from the subject property. And then to everybody's favorite, unnecessary hardship. Little enforcement of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. Unnecessary hardship means because of special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. A, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. And B, the proposed use is a reasonable one. I can honestly say that this is truly a case where we have special conditions. This is a farm that is 39.7 acres. It is zoned single residence A and single residence B, and I do not see that there is any fair and substantial relationship between not allowing the addition of the second unit to the existing structure and the new construction of the freestanding single living unit applies to that property. And lastly, the proposed use is a reasonable one. As I just stated, this is single residence A, single residence B, and this is a residential use. This is a house. I would ask for a stipulation to be approved by the board, and the stipulation would be that no more than 3 dwelling units will be allowed on the lot.
Thank you. Does the
seconded?
second, Mr. Mantle, do you have anything to
I
add?
have nothing more to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion before we vote? Mr. Raham?
Yeah, I don't think I can support this motion, and I guess my concern is I think that I think while you're trying to put a stipulation on there, I think it's a toothless stipulation. By definition, if we approve 3 dwelling units tonight, then that is what is allowed going forward. Putting a stipulation saying it's a maximum of 3 dwelling units, I don't think adds anything to address my concerns. This whole stretch of Beverly Hill Road has been single residence B, and the city has not done a great job at all of keeping it to anything close to being single residences. We've seen the larger lots, not surprisingly, be developed out to a maximum where we have many additional housing units put in place. Okay, so they weren't right, as part of this natural resource protection area. Perhaps it was a bit more something we could live with, but I just think that there was something very, very special created here. And I appreciate everything that the applicant is trying to do to continue what was created. My fear is that we're starting to roll down the hill of having something that is going to go completely in opposition to what people worked very hard to, and the Hetts in particular, of trying to create as something special for the city. Just in a mere 5 years since what this board allowed back in 2015, just a mere 5 years since that expired with its extension, we have gone from 2 dwelling units to now 3. And I think without some kind of additional type of stipulation, at some point it'll be like, well, it's just, we already have 3, it can just be 4, or somebody creates like 3 mega homes on there, they let the fields go fallow, and what was intended could potentially be lost. So I just, without something more to control it, I'm terribly concerned about the long-term future of this very unique asset, and with that, I can't support the motion.
I think just as the maker of the motion, that's a point very well taken and very well expressed, Mr. Rayham. I completely understand where you're going. When I say that no more than 3 dwelling units will be allowed on the lot, I do mean the entire lot, the 39.7 acres. So but your point is well taken.
I mean, it's natural resource protection. That's essentially unbuildable already. That's my concern.
I'd like to make a comment.
Please.
I will be supporting the motion. I think that, with all due respect to the long-term considerations, if you don't manage, there's an interesting saying that was very common in a company I used to work for, a very well-respected company, and that is, it's great to manage the long term, but if you don't manage the short term, you don't have a long term. And in the short term, this is necessary for the family to make it a viable agricultural effort. And I do believe that making this accommodation is appropriate. In the long term, we shall see what is economically feasible.
Okay. I'm going to support it too. It seems like a reasonable request. Goodness knows their density is not an issue. The Hett family is in favor. I think the 3 dwelling unit might have some teeth. We hope so. But if in 15 years a future ZBA is sitting up here and makes a different decision, I hope they do it with good intentions and following the rules, and I can't control that. So, if there are no further comments, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald.
I have one comment. This is a very exceptional instance, and everything about it is commendable. It's just the right thing to do with the right kind of people. And so we can take some action tonight, and we'll take a picture and put it in a safe deposit box, because the pressures of the economic market are going to be applied in the most dramatic ways you can imagine to a piece of property like this one. It's a spectacular piece of property, and however long it takes, probably won't take very long, the cracks will be found by clever lawyers from somewhere else who will find a way to come here and own that property, and then it will be developed again in a way, and probably with variances that none of us ever imagined. And I don't think, this is the United States, and it's the offspring of the United Kingdom, where development of the world has always been an imperative. It's by definition good, and if you try to stop it, you're bad and wrong. That's how the West was won. That was what lies behind the greatness of America now, and I don't think it's going to stop just because we took everything into account when we voted.
All right. If there are no more comments, we'll vote. Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. MacDonald?
No.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms. Raham?
No.
Mr. Raham? Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So I hope the family's happy there. Thank you. Okay,
Madam Chairman,
yes.
make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.